After all the reading and all the research I'd done, and you can feel overwhelmed, it can be a bit of an information overload.
Yeah.
And then I just decided I just need a really simple kind of mantra that I can just kind of keep in mind every day. And that's when I came up with just take your meds, MEDS, which is meditation, exercise, diet and sleep. And so they're just the 4 boxes I try and tick every day.
That's just so foundational.
Yeah.
I can totally understand why there's so many people who get this sort of diagnosis, and it's a horrible diagnosis to get, because it's sort of like, this is what you're going to get out of life, and it's terrifying to look down the barrel of it. But
totally.
What you've given me is an opportunity to go, I can change this.
Yeah.
I can take control of my diagnosis and get on top of this.
Yeah. And it was like that quote from Ian Gawler, who's a celebrated cancer survivor, says, believe the diagnosis but not the prognosis. So prognosis is just a statistical average that doesn't necessarily have to apply to you as a unique individual. And when I was given, the sort of, oncologists, I think they've learned not to give a prognosis. We saw this woman who's supposedly Australia's foremost authority on prostate cancer at the Garvan Institute in Sydney, and she said, I don't give prognosis anymore because I'm always wrong. And I thought, what's a good admission?
Good way to go,
because as I explained to you, you have this bell curve of like, this is where most people get to.
Flattening the curve like COVID.
But advanced prostate cancer, it's sort of 3 to 6 years. That's the big hump in the curve. But it's got this. Some people, don't survive as long, but some people survive much longer. It's got this really long tail. So there's people out here, these outliers at 10, 15, 20 years.
You're one of those people.
And as soon as I saw that graph, I'm like, hey, what are these people doing? And my oncologist would go, well, we don't know. It's a bit hard to study retrospectively. And I'm like, oh, come on, that's not good enough. You've got to be able to do better than that.
Yeah.
And then, so when you do your own research, and I think you've got to learn, how to assess the credibility of different sources of information too.
Yeah.
But there are legitimate, credible medical studies published in, credible medical journals that show the value of diet. And they all say the same thing, plant-based diet. And people get hung up on, should it be vegan or vegetarian or ketogenic or, all these different diets. And I think eat lots of plants, And if I think everyone's got to find what works for them. Some people might find it really hard to give up meat, so don't beat yourself up about it, because the guilt and tying yourself up in knots is probably worse for you than just having a steak if you really feel like you need one.
I genuinely thought it'd be a lot harder, and my situation was Easter coming through, and I'm an Easter egg fiend. I love my chocolate, I love my lollies, I was crazy with lollies. I'm also a hardcore meat eater, I used to go to restaurants and go, I want a big schnitzel or a steak and chips and stuff like that, and I just sort of instant, the minute I spoke to you and the minute I understood, right, I need to treat myself as well, I can't just expect, I want to be the poster child for the greatest neurosurgeon that ever helped me, I want to be now the person that succeeds, so I'm going to eat better. I'm going to live better. And, Easter came and they were having lollies. My son gave me grapes wrapped in aluminium foil. And that was my Easter egg. And it was bloody great. It was bloody beautiful. But when people were eating Easter eggs there, you could smell the waft. But now that smell doesn't even come to me anymore, And I'm not going to lie, this morning there was a little bit of chocolate and I had that. It was like a little block about that big with just dark chocolate.
Yeah, a bit of dark
chocolate, no sugar, and I had it and I felt bad in my tummy. And because I hadn't eaten it for so long.
You recalibrate your taste buds and your whole taste in foods, don't you?
And that's why talking to you is so important, Tim, because and putting it on video because I had this support base of you right at the start, and there's a lot of people that don't have that.
I think about that a lot. I was really lucky with good support, and so you just try and pass that on. I amazing displays of support from some incredible people, and I can't really repay them, but you know, I can pass it on.
And that's what you've done.
Yeah.
I hope I can do the same for you.
Yeah,
in honour of you, I hope I can do the same.
And so you just want people who are dealing with that, you know, just that awful, grim diagnosis to just be able to find some light and strength and hope. And you know, it's not about being unrealistic or, you know, wasting money on spurious miracle cures. It's all sensible, you know, common sense, evidence-based kind of stuff. But it's also, opening your mind to the possibility that this can transform your life in kind of positive ways, you know.
Very easy to look down a rabbit hole of like just all the different things, and you know, like I got contacted by everyone, but it just seemed when I talked to you, you'd done so much research and it was just so perfectly fine. Like it was, it wasn't sort of like do this, and like even my wife says sometimes I'm a bit of a shotgun.
Yeah, sure.
I'm like, I want to try all these different things to see how I can succeed, but it's that there is a terror that you're like, oh shit, this is what I've got, you know, like. But when I spoke to you, it was like narrowed down to things that were that you'd researched and you'd looked at, and it was sort of like, I'm sure that when you got your diagnosis, you had to go through that terrible path of.
Oh yeah,
you know.
I mean, I did a lot of reading. I did 2 5-day residential retreats at a place called the Gawler Foundation in Victoria that Ian Gawler started, and he was really the first guy who started cancer support groups. And when he, you know, this is 35 years ago or something, you know, he was given 3 months to live, you know, 35 years ago.
And he's still around.
He's still kicking.
Jesus.
So, you know, he's a pretty inspiring figure. And, you know, that experience was really, really valuable, but there was a huge amount of information, and it kind of was a bit of an information overload. And so then, it is kind of like what I do for work, you know, it's just taking in reams of information and sort of putting them through the kind of processor.
Speaking of work, though, are we going to see a book about this, Tim?
Yeah, you absolutely are, yeah. Well, I think I mentioned I'm doing a creative writing PhD through Griffith Uni. And writing a book as the basis for my PhD, which is going to be published by Penguin Random House in 2022.
And this is your experience?
Yeah, it's sort of, you know, it's largely personal memoir, but it's, I guess its intention is to offer some hope and support for people going through a cancer diagnosis. You know, in my instance, I guess with a particular emphasis on advanced prostate cancer, because there are specific challenges around that, I think, for men. And men, you know, aren't always great at opening up and talking about health and how they're feeling, and you know.
I know my wife keeps encouraging me in these videos to talk about the other side, because I'm trying to be as positive as possible.
Sure.
You know, chemo load hits. You know, it's just sort of you hurt. It's what I go through.
I mean, I've had some incredibly low moments, and I think it's important to be real about that, because you don't want to just convince people that it's all sunshine and rainbows, because it's not, you know. Right. But I feel like I feel like I've sort of, it's almost like going through a furnace and you come out the other side sort of stronger, you know. And so, you know, things like stress and fear are really not good for you. You know, the stress hormones like cortisol have been shown to feed cancer. So you don't want to stay in that kind of stress state. That's where meditation's really good. Other thing that Ian Gawler said, which really sort of stayed with me, was, you know, making your peace with your mortality. And he said an acceptance of our mortality is entirely compatible with a will to live. And so, as difficult as it's still recording. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, we're still recording. Sorry. No. I've got to do this all the time. I might leave this in the video to show how bad I am at this shit.
Because, you know, that's the big fear. That's the thing that freaks us all out. And if you can make your peace with that, then it just frees you up emotionally and energetically just to support your own health. So you're not just trying to hold something at bay. you're just like, okay, this is the nature of life and existence, and as the Buddha says, you know, our life's work is to prepare for death, and that might sound morbid, but it's kind of liberating.
Yeah.
And so when you kind of entered that was a really pivotal turning point for me. Was just, I thought, if my only focus here is survival, then I'm always on tenterhooks. I'm always hanging on the next blood test or the next scan or whatever. But if I can sort of make my peace, like we're all going to die, you know, and this might be difficult to talk about, but I think it's a conversation worth having, because as a society we're not very good at it.
Yeah. When we first had the operation, it was like 2 weeks later, my wife and I went to a place up at Noosa, just a little, and the first night we talked, and it was stuff that needed to be said, you know, and it was cathartic in a way, because what you're saying here, making peace with your mortality, it was an opportunity for me to talk about things that were like, and we you know, cried, like, you know, it was like tears.
Oh yeah.
But it was about, you know, what will happen if, you know, and it was all done. The best thing about those discussions was, once I said it, I never had to say it again.
Yeah.
You know, and it was a horrible thing for Jacinta to have to sit through too, to hear me say that, but it was done, you know, like, and it almost felt like this weight had just disappeared.
Yeah.
You know? And I feel like I'm stronger because that's been said, and it never needs to be said again.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that's really key, and for me it felt, you know, just to go through, I mean, as painful as it is, you kind of, if you don't go through that, then you're just kind of trying to hold it at bay, and like I said, you're using up your emotional reserves trying to hold back this fear.
Yeah.
Whereas if you kind of allow it, then emotionally and energetically you've got more resources to just support your health.
Yeah, I felt like I've lost fear from that. You know, like that discussion just cleared everything. It was incredible. It was cathartic.
Yeah, and look, it's an ongoing process, and I don't pretend to have kind of arrived at some sort of enlightened state where, you know, death holds no fear for me, but I'm more comfortable with the topic than I used to be.
Yeah.
But it's not about sort of waving the white flag and going, oh, this thing's going to take me out. It's just about, I'm not going to let that fear run my life.
Yes.
You know, and it's the same, similar when, you know, when we talk about cancer and the power of that word.
Yeah.
You know, I have as a writer who deals with words, I want to kind of take the power away from that word.
I love that.
You know,
that's what started making these.
Yeah.
That's why I made these, because what you said, take the power away from cancer.
Yeah. Like I started writing something and it was just like cancer. Yeah. You know, and I was just kind of coming up with all the different phrases that have the word cancer in it.
I think my wife just got a cameo in that video.
Yeah.
She just walked through. Where are you, sis?
Photo bombing. Yeah.
She's gone now.
But yeah, just to sort of take the power away from it. And the other thing that I shared with you that, you know, I think really resonated with something that Ian Gawler said was just like, you know, cancer cells they're just dumb cells. They don't know when to stop reproducing.
Yes,
you know?
they are.
And for some reason, it was sort of comforting way of casting things, because we sort of think of it as this dark, insidious force that's come into our bodies and it's gonna, you know, wreak havoc with us and threaten our life, and even the way we use the word, in, you know. So yeah, just trying to take some of the sting out of it. You know, it's part of you, it's part of your own body. They're your own cells that are just wigged out. And I like you know, some of the stuff that Ian Gawler would talk about, meditating on, like how healthy most, you know, 99.9% of your body is in perfect health, and there's this one little part that's just not kind of doing what it's supposed to do. And the health and vitality in the rest of your body is much stronger and more powerful than this little bit of ill health. And I love meditating on that and just feeling just that health and vitality through my body. And, you know, when I meditate, I feel like I'm just flooding my body with breath and awareness and white light and whatever, you know, different things work for different people, you know. Yeah. But for me, Yeah.
We talk about meditation, and it's kind of one of those things that was introduced to me with all this, and I never, like, I keep saying I was never a hippie, and that's the thing, I was never would have even thought of this, but the enjoyment out of meditation in terms of concentrating on your breathing and just feeling it flow through your body. It's like you feel like you're connecting to your body in a way that you never thought you'd connect.
Yeah.
Like and I'm just feeling it now.
Yeah.
Like,
And it's a lot of it is just learning to still the mind.
Yeah.
Like I think in Western societies, particularly in this day and age, we're the most stimulated humans in the history of the world. We've got so much information and stuff bombarding us at every moment.
I've got a TV behind the camera with Netflix on. Not Netflix on, but it's just sitting there. Like it is. It's sensory overload.
Yeah, and so I practice Vipassana meditation, which is a very particular technique, but it's a bit like the diet thing. I don't care what type of meditation people want to do or which kind of diet they subscribe to. Still the sort of basic principles of focus on the breath, still the mind, or with your diet, eat lots of plants. Yeah. Just trying to keep things simple and kind of non-denominational. Yeah. Like you don't have to argue about which form of meditation's better or which diet's better. You just do what feels right, works for you, and
what feels right for you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think meditation is a bit sort of mystical in a lot of people's eyes, but it's really simple, and it's kind of retraining the brain from what we've gotten used to, which is the monkey mind. It's always jumping from thing to thing, from the past to the future, to fears, to hopes, to trying to control the world around us, and it's just like, just give it a rest, Yeah. And I read or heard someone say, the mind is a wonderful tool, but it makes a lousy boss.
I genuinely feel like with meditation, my brain is just feeling so much better.
Yeah, just give it a rest. Like, it works really hard all day, every waking hour.
This one's working really bloody hard now.
So just let it clock off for, an hour or two a day and just be still. I can see your Buddha in the garden sitting there. Yeah.
That's been sitting in our garden for years, but do you think I've ever referenced it?
Yeah. And for me now, after nearly 6 years of practice, the fact that I can just kind of sit comfortably for an hour and just zone out, and people might go, well, what's that do for you? It's like, well, my mind is completely at rest. I'm not churning over the past or the future. There's a lot of evidence that shows it is your optimal healing state. Yeah. They talk about this study they did on some Buddhist monk who meditated for 10,000 hours or something, and they call him the happiest man in the world. When they stick electrodes to his brain and try and map his brain, like they can see the parts of the brain that light up when you're happy. They reckon this guy's the happiest guy in the world.
Wow. Jesus, I'm going to keep meditating. I need to get happier.
Yeah. Well, you just think you're just dwelling in a state where you're not agonising over the past or the future. We spend a lot of time projecting, into the past or the future rather than just being present in the moment and being right here, right now is probably the greatest gift of a cancer diagnosis, I think. Having to live in the present moment, because you start churning, with your thoughts about what if. There's no peace to be found there. Yeah.
There isn't.
And just feeling into yourself and letting the breath just flow through the body and letting the brain switch off for a bit. It just feels like the best medicine.
Yeah, it kind of feels like you're making your breath accountable. Like when I've done it, it sort of makes it feel like your breath is part of the healing process.
Yeah,
like
totally.
You're breathing it in, and it's the good natural that's cleaning things out. Like I know that your brain's up here, but as you've said before, like I've felt things tingle that should never have tingled in my head, because it's sort of like it feels like the breath is doing something when I'm doing it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about becoming really sensitive to your whole system. And it's like when you clean up your diet, your body starts knowing what it needs. So you're listening to those subtle, sensitive signals. Your body's a really finely tuned instrument, but if you're not sensitive to that stuff, you just reach for sugar or salt or fat or those kind of quick fixes of flavour.
Mate, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you from a number of reasons. First, you put me in the right direction.
Yeah.
But two, thank you because like I want other people to see this, because this is sort of like I had a support base, but there's people that don't get this.
Yeah.
So I want other people to know that, you know, it's this is how I got where I got, and you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Thanks.
My pleasure, mate. And like I said, I keep getting as much out of it as you do. You know, it's a win-win.
Yeah, look, I mean, one thing I've learned is, you know, talk to people that are going through this world. You know, like there's people that are going through a harder time than me right now, and I've talked to them, and it just feels so. It does, as you said, it feels rewarding to talk to these people, but also you get something off them, they get stuff off you. Like it's a positive energy.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I talk about it, it kind of makes me realise, wow, like I've come a long way and I've learned a lot, and you sort of have to articulate a process that you've just been through internally.
It probably strengthens your resolve too.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, totally.